The boy's life was not an easy one. He woke up every morning on a thin mat laid across a cracked cement floor. The roof above his head leaked when it rained, and the walls of his small home carried stains of years gone by. He did not have toys, nor did he have new clothes. His shirts were always faded, his shoes had holes, and sometimes he had to walk barefoot because the soles had worn out completely. But what he did have was a heart that cared, a heart much bigger than his pocket. He lived with his widowed mother, who worked as a washerwoman in the neighborhood. Every day she would leave early, carrying a heavy basket of clothes, her hands rough from soap and water. She tried her best to keep food on the table, but many nights they survived only on bread and water. The boy, though young, understood their situation. He never complained when dinner was small, and he never asked for things other children had. He had learned to treasure little things: a smile from his mother, a cool breeze on a hot day, a coin found on the road. Those coins mattered the most. Every now and then, when he did small errands for neighbors, carrying bags, running messages, someone would drop a coin into his hand. He kept them carefully in a small tin box under his mat. That collection of coins was not much, but to him it was hope. Sometimes he used them to buy bread. Sometimes he saved them, dreaming of one day buying a small gift for his mother. The sound of coins clinking in his hand made him feel rich, even if the world around him called him poor. The boy had always been different from others in his neighborhood. While many children laughed at beggars or ignored the struggles of the elderly, he felt every pain as though it were his own. If someone dropped a bundle, he ran to pick it up and return it. If a dog was hungry, he would share his bread. His mother often told him, "Son, we may not have much, but we still have enough to give." Those words stayed in his heart like a flame. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the streets glowed with the soft orange light of dusk, the boy walked home with a few coins in his pocket. His stomach growled with hunger. He hadn't eaten properly all day. He thought of stopping at the bakery to buy a piece of bread. The smell of freshly baked loaves drifted through the air, tempting him. He placed his hand on his pocket, feeling the rough edges of the coins, and imagined the warm bread in his hands. But before he could take a step inside, his eyes caught something that made him stop. Just outside a small clinic, an old couple sat on a wooden bench. The man's hands trembled as he coughed, and the woman beside him looked worried, holding a small slip of paper, a prescription. They looked fragile, worn down by time and hardship. The boy slowed his pace, watching from a distance. He overheard their low voices. "We don't have enough money for the medicine," the old woman whispered, her voice breaking. "What will we do now?" The old man shook his head weakly, coughing again, his face pale. The boy's heart squeezed. He knew that feeling, wanting something so badly and not having enough to pay for it. He looked down at his coins again. They were few, barely enough for bread. For a moment he stood frozen. He thought of his hunger, his empty stomach, and the soft bread waiting in the shop. But then he looked back at the couple. The woman's tired eyes, the man's weak body, it was as if his mother's words echoed again in his ears. "We may not have much, but we still have enough to give." His decision came with both pain and peace. He walked slowly to the pharmacy window, his small fist tight around the coins. The pharmacist looked down at him, puzzled, when the boy placed the coins on the counter. "I need the medicine for them," the boy said, pointing at the old couple. The pharmacist frowned. "This isn't enough to cover the cost." The boy lowered his head, his face burning with shame, but he pushed the coins forward again. "Please, it's all I have." The man behind the counter looked at the fragile couple outside, then at the boy's thin frame and determined eyes. After a moment of hesitation, he sighed, took the coins, and handed over a small packet of medicine. The boy picked it up carefully as if holding treasure and walked out. When he reached the old couple, he placed the medicine in their hands with a small smile. The woman gasped, her eyes filling with tears. "Child, why would you?" she whispered. The boy shrugged shyly. "Because you need it more than I need bread." The old man's hands shook as he held the packet. His lips trembled as he whispered a blessing the boy would never forget. "May heaven knock on your door one day the way you knocked on ours." The boy walked away quietly, his stomach still empty, but his heart strangely full. He did not know that this single act of kindness, paid with his last coins, would soon change his life forever. The night after the boy gave away his coins was one of hunger, but also one of peace. His stomach twisted and growled as he lay on the thin mat beside his mother, but his mind replayed the look on the old couple's faces when he placed the medicine in their hands. He had seen their relief, their trembling gratitude, their whispered blessings. That memory warmed him more than food could. He closed his eyes, telling himself that sometimes kindness was enough to fill a person's heart, even when the belly stayed empty. The next morning he rose early as always. He fetched water from the communal pump, swept the dusty floor of their small home, and prepared to run errands for neighbors in the hope of earning a few coins. His mother smiled at him, though her eyes carried worry. She knew he had gone to bed without dinner. But the boy never spoke of his sacrifices. He only said, "I'm fine, Mama," and kissed her rough hands before stepping outside. On the way to the market, he passed the same clinic where he had seen the old couple the evening before. Something tugged at him and he slowed his steps. There they were again, sitting on the same wooden bench under the shade of a crooked tree. The man's cough still racked his thin chest, though softer now, perhaps eased by the medicine. The woman held his arm, her face a mixture of fear and determination. They looked small against the noise of the street, two fragile figures waiting for a world that rarely noticed the weak. The boy hesitated, watching from a distance. He had already helped them once. What more could he do? His pockets were empty now. Yet his heart urged him closer, as though invisible strings pulled him toward them. He could not ignore them, not after what he had seen in their eyes. The old woman noticed him first. Her tired lips curved into a weak smile. "It's you," she said softly, her voice cracked with both gratitude and surprise. "You're the one who gave us the medicine yesterday." The boy nodded shyly, scratching the back of his head. He felt his cheeks grow warm. "Did it help?" he asked, his voice timid. The old man leaned forward, his frail hand clutching the boy's shoulder. "It did, child. You saved me from another night of pain. You gave us hope when we had none." His voice shook with emotion. "Why would you help strangers like us?" The boy lowered his gaze. He didn't know how to explain it. How could he put into words the ache he felt every time he saw suffering? How could he explain that even though he had nothing, he couldn't walk away when others needed him? Finally he whispered, "Because my mother says, even if we don't have much, we should still share what we can. Yesterday you needed it more than I did." The woman's eyes brimmed with tears. She pressed her hand to his cheek, her touch trembling but tender. "You are a gift from God," she murmured. Just then the pharmacist stepped outside. He looked at the boy, then at the couple. "That child," he said to them, "used his very last coins for you. He could have bought bread for himself, but he chose you instead. Do you know how rare that is?" His voice carried admiration, but also a trace of guilt. The couple's eyes widened. They had not known it was his last money. The old man's lips quivered and he whispered again, "Bless you, child. Bless you 1,000 times." The boy shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. He wasn't used to praise. To him it was simple, someone needed help and he had helped. That was all. But to the old couple it was more than that. It was proof that kindness still existed in a world that often turned cold. That day the boy stayed near them longer, fetching them water from a vendor and helping them cross the busy street when the traffic grew heavy. He didn't have money anymore, but he still had his hands, his time, and his care. What the boy did not know was that his small act of kindness had already begun to ripple outward. The pharmacist had spoken of him to others. A fruit seller nearby had noticed his sacrifice. Word of the boy's choice began to spread quietly through the neighborhood. And somewhere across the city, it would soon reach the ears of a man whose wealth could change everything. For now, though, the boy was just a poor child standing beside an old couple, smiling shyly, unaware that his fate was already shifting. Tomorrow someone powerful would knock on his door. But today he was simply a boy who chose compassion over comfort, a boy whose last coins had bought not only medicine but also hope. The boy's pockets had never been heavy. Most days they carried nothing but dust from the streets or a small pebble he kicked while walking. But on that particular evening, when the old couple's need pressed against his heart like a stone, he reached into his pocket and felt the tiny weight of his last coins. 3 coins. That was all. Their edges were rough from years of use, and together they couldn't buy more than a piece of bread or a bowl of soup. For him, though, those coins were survival. He had been saving them carefully, dreaming of food to quiet the hunger in his stomach or perhaps a treat for his mother. He pulled them out and held them in his palm, staring at them in the fading light. They glistened weakly under the street lamps, their shine far less than the sparkle of the jewelry shops down the road, but more precious to him than gold. He clenched his fist tight, feeling the hard edges bite into his skin. Hunger twisted in his belly, making him hesitate. His lips were dry. He hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. If he gave away these coins, there would be nothing left for him tonight. Across the road, the old couple coughed and shivered. The man leaned heavily against the bench, his chest rattling with every breath. The woman's hands trembled as she held the prescription slip. Her face carried both fear and shame, the look of someone who wanted to help the person she loved but couldn't. They spoke in low voices, but the boy caught enough to understand. They couldn't afford the medicine. He turned his head, his mind at war with his body. One voice inside whispered, "Keep the coins. You need food. You'll faint without it. Who will help your mother if you fall sick?" Another voice, softer but stronger, whispered back, "They are older. They are weaker. They might not survive the night without this medicine." His mother's words echoed again, "We may not have much, but we still have enough to give." The boy opened his fist and stared at the coins once more. His hands shook as he took a step toward the pharmacy. The shop was lit, the glass counter shining under yellow bulbs. Behind it, the pharmacist stood, tired from a long day. The boy walked slowly, his small shadow stretching across the dusty floor. When he reached the counter, he placed the coins down one by one. The sound was soft, but it carried the weight of his decision. The pharmacist looked down, puzzled. "What do you need, child?" The boy swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. "The medicine for them," he said, pointing to the old couple sitting outside. The pharmacist frowned, picking up the slip. He shook his head gently. "This medicine costs more than what you've given me. These coins are not enough." The boy's chest tightened. He pushed the coins forward again, his eyes pleading. "It's all I have. Please. They need it more than I need anything." There was a silence. The pharmacist studied the boy's thin frame, the patched clothes, the desperation hidden in his brave face. He glanced at the couple outside, their hopeless figures waiting in the dark. Something inside him shifted. With a sigh, he picked up a small packet of the medicine, placed it on the counter, and slid it toward the boy. "Go on," he said softly. "Take it to them." The boy's eyes widened. Relief washed over him. He picked up the medicine as though it were a treasure chest. His hand trembled, but his smile was steady. He turned quickly and hurried outside. The old woman looked up in surprise as the boy stopped in front of her. He held out the packet. "This is for you," he said simply. Her eyes widened, her lips parting as tears welled up. "Child, no, we cannot take this from you. You need it." The boy shook his head. "No, you need it more than me." The old man reached for the packet, his hands trembling. He pressed it to his chest, his eyes wet. His voice broke as he whispered, "You've given us more than medicine. You've given us hope." The boy smiled shyly, his stomach growling but his heart strangely full. For him the choice had been hard, but once made it felt right. He had given away his last coins, but he had gained something priceless. The knowledge that even the smallest sacrifice could change someone's world. What he did not realize as he walked home with empty pockets, was that his decision had already set something larger into motion. Kindness, like a stone dropped into a pond, had sent ripples far beyond what his young heart could imagine. By morning, those ripples would carry a millionaire to his door. The boy walked out of the pharmacy with the small packet of medicine cradled in his hands as if it were the most delicate treasure in the world. The cool paper pressed against his palms, and though it was light in weight, he felt the heaviness of his decision pressing down on him. His stomach churned with hunger, sharper now that he knew his coins were gone. The bakery scent still lingered in the air from across the street, warm bread, golden and fresh. For a moment, his heart squeezed painfully, reminding him of what he had given up. But then he looked ahead at the old couple sitting hunched on the bench, and all thoughts of himself faded. The woman lifted her head when she saw him approach, her tired eyes widening at the sight of the medicine in his hands. Her lips parted, trembling with disbelief. You got it?" she whispered, her voice shaking as though she couldn't trust her own sight. The boy nodded and held it out to her with both hands. "This is for you," he said softly. The man reached forward, his fingers trembling as they closed around the packet. For a moment he just held it, staring as if it were a miracle fallen from the sky. Then his chest shuddered with a cough, and he pressed the medicine against it, as though the simple touch might already bring relief. His wife covered her mouth with her hand, and tears spilled freely down her wrinkled cheeks. "But child," she stammered, how could you pay for this?" The boy lowered his eyes. "I gave what I had." The old woman looked at his thin arms, his patched shirt, his sunken cheeks, and in that instant she understood. He hadn't given from abundance, he had given from nothing. The truth struck her so hard that she leaned against her husband for support. "You used your last coins, didn't you?" The boy did not answer directly, but the silence between his words was louder than any admission. He smiled faintly instead, shy and gentle. "It's okay. You need it more than me." The old man's hand shook as he placed it on the boy's shoulder. His voice cracked with emotion. "Child, you saved me tonight. You saved us both. We may not have riches to give you, but we will pray for you with every breath we have left." The boy nodded, feeling both embarrassed and comforted. He wasn't used to praise. To him, it wasn't a heroic act. It was simply what his heart had told him to do. The couple clutched the medicine as though it were life itself, whispering blessings under their breath. The woman raised her hands to the sky, praying aloud, "May the heavens open their doors for this boy. May someone knock on his door one day with the kindness he showed us tonight." The boy felt a strange warmth spread through him, almost like the bread he had denied himself. His body was weak with hunger, but his heart was filled with a quiet strength. That night as he walked home, the streets seemed longer than usual. His legs felt heavy, and the pangs in his stomach twisted sharply. But each step was carried by a sense of peace he had never known before. He thought of the couple's tears, their prayers, their gratitude. Those images replayed in his mind like a song that kept him moving forward. When he finally reached his small home, his mother was waiting. She asked if he had eaten, but he only smiled and said he wasn't hungry. She didn't push him, though she saw the tiredness in his eyes. He lay down on the mat, his body aching, but as sleep pulled him under, his heart was light. The old couple, meanwhile, sat in their modest home clutching the packet of medicine. They whispered prayers into the night for the boy who had given them hope when they had nothing. And though he didn't know it yet, their whispered blessings would soon travel farther than either of them could imagine, straight to the ears of a man whose wealth was vast, but whose heart was empty, waiting to be touched. The sacrifice of a few coins had given life to one man, comfort to one woman, and hope to an entire night. But it was only the beginning. By morning, the boy's simple act would set into motion a chain of events that would knock on his own door and change his destiny forever. The sun had barely risen when the story began to travel. It started small, like a whisper moving through narrow streets, passed from mouth to mouth. The pharmacist told it to his neighbor, shaking his head in wonder. The fruit seller repeated it to a customer, his voice full of awe. By noon, the tale had spread across the market stalls and tea shops, about a boy who had nothing, yet gave away his last coins to save two strangers. People nodded, some smiling, others wiping at their eyes. In a city hardened by poverty and survival, such a story was rare, like a flower growing between cracks of stone. And then it reached the ears of a man who lived in a world far removed from these streets. A millionaire whose name carried weight in business halls and whose wealth built towers across the skyline. He sat in his office, surrounded by glass walls and polished furniture, when one of his assistants mentioned it. The man had heard many stories before, most of them forgotten within minutes. But something in the way it was told, the simplicity, the purity of the act, caught him off guard. He set down his pen, leaned back in his chair and asked, "Tell me again." The assistant, a younger man from the poorer side of the city, retold the story carefully. "Sir, they say a poor black boy gave up his last coins for medicine. He could have eaten, but he chose to save an old couple instead. The whole market is talking about it." The millionaire frowned, not in disbelief but in thought. His last coins? Yes, the assistant confirmed. Everything he had. The words echoed in the millionaire's mind like a bell. He thought of the money he had spent the night before on wine and entertainment, more than the boy had probably seen in his entire life. Yet here was a child who gave everything, not for fame or recognition but simply because it was right. The thought unsettled him. He had seen generosity before, but usually with strings attached. Donations made for publicity, gifts exchanged for favors. This was different. This was pure. He rose from his chair, walked to the wide window and looked down at the city below. Cars rushed, people hurried, life moved in its usual rhythm. But somewhere in that crowded sprawl lived a boy with nothing, and yet with more heart than all the wealthy men he knew. The millionaire felt a tightening in his chest. He remembered his own childhood, barefoot, hungry, desperate. He remembered nights when his family had nothing but boiled water to drink. But over the years, success had buried those memories beneath layers of silk and marble. Now this boy's act uncovered them again, raw and painful. The assistant broke the silence. "Sir, the couple he helped lives near the old clinic. People say they are still talking about the boy. If you wish, I can find out where he lives." The millionaire turned, his eyes sharper now. "Do it," he said. His voice was low but firm, carrying the weight of a decision already made. All day the thought gnawed at him. He attended meetings, signed contracts, shook hands, but his mind drifted back to the nameless boy. What kind of courage did it take to choose hunger over selfishness? How could a child with so little carry such strength? And what did it say about himself, a man with so much who rarely gave without hesitation? By evening he could no longer sit still. He wanted to see the boy with his own eyes. As dusk fell, a black car rolled through the narrow lanes of the poor district, its polished body reflecting the flickering lights of small shops. Children paused their games to stare. Women whispered from doorsteps. The car looked out of place like a giant among sparrows. Inside, the millionaire sat in silence, his mind restless. He carried no arrogance that night, only a strange mix of curiosity and humility. He was not coming to test or to judge. He was coming to understand. And as the car slowed near a row of crumbling houses, the driver pointed to a small one with a crooked door. "This is where he lives, sir," the driver said quietly. The millionaire stared at it, his heart pounding. Tomorrow he would knock on that door. But tonight, as the city grew quiet, he already knew. The boy's sacrifice had changed something deep inside him. He had come looking for the boy, but in truth he was searching for a part of himself he had long forgotten. The next morning began like any other for the boy. He rose early, his stomach still hollow from the night before, but his spirit lightened by the memory of the old couple's grateful faces. He fetched water, swept the dusty floor of their small home, and kissed his mother's hands before leaving to run errands. To him, it was just another day of survival, another day of hoping a neighbor might pay him a coin or two for carrying a basket or fetching groceries. He had no idea that his world was about to change. Far across the city, the millionaire prepared himself in a way he rarely did. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit or polished shoes. Instead, he dressed simply as if he didn't want his wealth to speak before he did. His driver pulled the sleek car into the poor neighborhood again, its black surface drawing curious stares. Windows creaked open, whispers spread along the narrow lanes. Everyone wondered why such a powerful car had returned. The car stopped before the boy's crooked door. The millionaire sat for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He could buy anything he wanted, yet for the first time in years he felt nervous. This wasn't a business deal or a gala speech. This was a meeting with a child who had unknowingly reminded him of what it meant to be human. Finally he opened the door and stepped out. His polished shoes touched the dirt of the street, and the people nearby fell silent. Children gawked, women peered from their doorways, men muttered in surprise. The millionaire ignored them all. His eyes were fixed on the small wooden door before him, its paint peeling, its hinges creaking. He walked up the few steps and raised his hand. Knock, knock, knock. Inside, the boy was sweeping the floor when the sound echoed through the small house. He froze. Hardly anyone ever knocked on their door. Neighbors usually called out instead. His mother frowned, wiping her hands on her worn apron. "Who could that be?" she whispered. The boy set the broom aside and went to the door. When he pulled it open, he gasped. Standing before him was not a neighbor or a street vendor, but a tall man with kind but weary eyes, dressed neatly though not extravagantly. Behind him, the gleaming black car caught the morning light. The boy's heart pounded. "Are you the one?" the millionaire asked gently, "who gave his last coins for medicine?" The boy blinked, startled. He wasn't used to strangers knowing anything about him, let alone something so private. His cheeks grew hot. He looked down and mumbled, I only wanted to help." The millionaire bent slightly so his gaze met the boy's. In his eyes was no mockery, no condescension, only deep respect. "And you did. More than you know." By now, the old couple had arrived, having heard the news spreading through the neighborhood that a wealthy man was seeking the boy. They stood behind the millionaire, their voices trembling as they told the boy's mother what had happened at the clinic, how her son had given up everything for them. Tears filled the woman's eyes. She clutched her son's shoulders tightly, pride and sorrow mixing in her heart. The neighbors gathered in a crowd, whispering and pointing. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others wiped their eyes. The millionaire turned back to the boy. "You may think your act was small," he said softly, "but to me, it is greater than all the riches I have earned. You showed me a kind of wealth I had forgotten, the wealth of compassion." The boy shifted uncomfortably and used to such praise. "I just didn't want them to suffer," he whispered. The millionaire placed a hand on his shoulder. "And that is why I am here. Because someone who can give so much with so little deserves more than hunger and hardship." The air grew still. The boy's mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. The old couple wept openly. And the boy, trembling, realized this moment was no ordinary visit. The knock on his door was not just the sound of a stranger seeking him. It was destiny itself, arriving to repay a debt of kindness no one had expected to be seen. The crooked wooden door remained open, and the boy stood frozen, staring at the man who seemed out of place in his world of patched walls and bare floors. His mother's hands still trembled on his shoulders, and the neighbors pressed closer, their whispers filling the lane. Yet inside that small house time seemed to stop. The millionaire's eyes softened as he looked from the boy to the mother, then back again. He saw not just poverty but dignity, the kind of strength that comes from surviving with nothing but hope. He stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly on the uneven floor. The room was tiny, the furniture sparse, yet the space carried warmth. A few family photos hung on the wall, faded but cherished. A clay pot of water stood in the corner. A thin mat lay on the floor, neatly folded. The millionaire's throat tightened. He had lived in mansions with gold chandeliers and silk carpets, but none of them carried the purity of this little room. Turning to the boy, he spoke gently. You gave away your last coins without hesitation. You chose hunger for yourself so that two strangers could live another day. Tell me, child, why did you do it? The boy looked down, his bare toes curling against the floor. His voice was quiet but steady. Because they needed it more than me. My stomach hurts, but their pain was worse. My mother says, we must share even if we have little. The millionaire closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the sting of tears. When he opened them, his voice was firm but full of emotion. Then today I will share what I have with you. Gasps rippled through the crowd outside. The boy's mother covered her mouth, her eyes wide. The old couple clutched each other, whispering prayers of gratitude. The millionaire went on. From this day you will not worry about food or medicine or school. I will take care of your education, your home, your future. You and your mother will live with dignity, not with hunger. The boy's eyes widened. He had never dreamed of such words being spoken to him. His lips trembled, but no sound came out. His mother dropped to her knees, tears streaming, and whispered, Sir, we cannot repay this. The millionaire knelt beside her, his voice breaking. There is nothing to repay. It is I who am in debt, to your son who reminded me of humanity. He stood then and addressed the crowd gathering in the lane. Do you all see this child? He gave his last coins when he had nothing. We must all learn from him. Wealth is not measured by what we keep, but by what we give. The neighbors nodded, some crying, some clapping softly. The story that had begun as a whisper now became a lesson spoken aloud, one that would not be forgotten. The millionaire placed his hand on the boy's head, almost like a blessing. You thought your kindness was small. But it was greater than anything I have ever done with my fortune. And because of it, your life will never be the same. True to his word, the millionaire arranged for the boy to attend school, to wear clothes without holes, to sleep in a bed instead of on a mat. He gave the mother work that eased her burdens and dignity that brightened her spirit. He also funded the clinic nearby, so that no old couple would ever sit hopeless again, waiting for medicine they couldn't afford. But perhaps the greatest change was not in the boy's life, but in the millionaire's. The act of a hungry child had broken the walls around his heart. He no longer gave for recognition or to see his name engraved in stone. He gave because it was right. The boy had taught him that. And so the story closed not with wealth but with a lesson. One simple truth. Kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives. Sometimes even the poorest hand carries the richest gift. That night, as the boy lay on his mat, now with a full stomach and his mother smiling beside him, he whispered a prayer of thanks. He had given away his last coins, but in return, the world had given him back a future. And outside, the city hummed with the tale of the boy whose empty pocket carried more treasure than a millionaire's fortune.